Testing, testing. Hello, everybody. All right, we're here for the evening edition. Woo. Or I guess you could call it the nightly edition if you're on the East Coast. All right, we do have some really strong weather going on. And Erica was in the studio earlier talking about that and talking about the action in the Pacific. But we wanted to come on and give you one more update about the storms that are still ongoing in the central part of the country in the U.S. and also answer an awesome trivia question about the tropics. It's a good one, so stay tuned for that. The first graphic that I'm showing you here is this is the 24-hour radar loop, and very rarely do we go that far back in what we do here in the forecasting, but it's important to show, in this case, how these systems have evolved over the last 24 hours across the country, particularly in the upper Midwest, where we've had several rounds of what we call convective complexes that have developed and pushed through the same general area up near the Great Lakes in the upper Midwest, the upper Ohio River Valley. And this evening is no different in that regard. We have more storms that are now working down. Interesting how they're riding the top of the high pressure ridge that is over the southern plains. There's about 1,021 millibar ridge down there, and that's helping to kind of keep the storms over the top, as we say, of that ridge. But the line of storms that you can see here that has formed over the course of the afternoon and the evening, right near Chicago, actually, and then pushed down through Illinois, Indiana, here in these last frames, and continues to develop more just rainfall, really, over Ohio and Missouri. Not worried about the severe nature of those storms by comparison, just the heavy amounts of rain and potentially some hail with those. But the complex that has pushed down over Gary, Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, working down from north to south there, that looks pretty impressive for the next several hours. And if you get anything close to the weather that we saw in Minneapolis, which I can show you that complex here that ended up rotating and going up over into Canada today, this time yesterday, that Boeing complex, you can see it here in the radar loop as it developed, moved across Minnesota, and then impacted Minneapolis with a really large bow echo you can see there. Those wind speeds were 63 miles an hour and did cause considerable damage across that area. You can see this other Boeing complex that has moved across Wisconsin, and now it did dissipate, but there's another complex that's developed over the course of today, and that pushed across the lake and actually impacted Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York State. So we have multiple rounds here with this event. In terms of really strong winds, we're not seeing the severity that we had last night at this time, and I took a quick look before I went on air here. The strongest winds that I saw in the country were actually in Montana, of all places right now, where we're dealing with this intrusion of, I guess you could say it's fall weather. I mean, it's still technically summer, but we are getting some chilly temps moving down into the mountain regions there, and we have a nice colder dome of high pressure that's sitting just about over the middle of Colorado right now. So that's certainly helping to bring in some early chill to the air in the mountains. And I've seen some video from some friends of mine, one in particular who lives in Wyoming, and he was showing some snow, and it wasn't all that high in elevation either. It wasn't like it was 10,000 feet or anything. He was driving in snow showers, so it's already here, folks. Mount Shasta in California looked pretty impressive with the white cap on it yesterday. The only other wind, high wind to speak of, that we have going on right now at the moment is in one of the windiest places on Earth, and we'll take a quick zoom in to show you that. And although you can see a little bit of precip activity there. So this is the presidential range of mountains in New Hampshire, and the weather station on Mount Washington, which is the highest point in New Hampshire, highest point in New England for that matter, at 6,288 feet above sea level. They were recording winds in excess of 55 miles an hour at the last report, which, I mean, depending on where you live in the country, that might not sound like an awful lot, or it might sound like a lot, rather. But to the people of Mount Washington, that's a gentle breeze. They're used to wind in excess of 100 miles an hour on a routine basis up there. Based on their location, they're positioned in an area where intersecting portions of our jet streams combine over that region. So we often see really, really strong winds in that area. But tonight, 55 miles an hour, we'll take it in that vicinity. So that's a review of what we were looking at coast to coast here with these storms. And I think this radar view really gives you this perspective here, shows you the complexes that are impacting mostly the central portion of the country and just nudging over now toward New England and the tri-states. We'll see another day of this scenario breaking out tomorrow. The storms here that are inching along this cold front are doing so pretty slowly. That front's taken its time to move and will eventually become more of a stationary boundary for portions of it and linger for even longer. How about that for a run? In the desert Southwest, we still have that monsoonal setup here, but it has lessened considerably from what it was late last week and through the weekend. And actually Texas, if you can see there, beginning to see some shower activity over Texas. That's a good thing. They could use the rain, just like we could in California, where we, for the most part, have gone just about 100 days without seeing any appreciable rainfall in the Southern California area. So, a little bit would be good if we can try to find that in the long-range forecast somewhere. And lastly, on this hit, we'll take a look at the tropical Atlantic, which is beginning to show some signs that it's waking up. And what I mean by that is, even though we're on the nighttime infrared view here, you can see out across the greater Atlantic, there's an area of disturbance roughly between 35 and 45 degrees east. So not quite toward the African continent, but out in the middle of the open ocean here, there's an area that looks to be slowly getting better organized. We're going to watch that. And then this complex that's moving off the coast of Africa, which is about at 15 degrees, that looks very healthy. And although we've been dealing with a lot of Saharan dust over the Atlantic for the last week, at least almost 2 weeks now, we're seeing a bit of a change there. So these two systems are certainly worth watching. And even the new system ejecting off of Africa and it's in a much better position compared to some of the last systems that were working across Africa, but coming off into the water a bit further to the north. So, when you get north of the Cape Verde Islands here, the water temperatures are cooler. So we haven't seen anything to the south of the islands where the temperatures are much, much warmer. I mean, like 90-degree water out there. And now we're beginning to see a change. So the tropics could heat up here in more ways than one in a very short period of time. And if you can see that one little feature, this is something neat that I was watching on the loop. Look at this, just this little lone area of storminess. It's probably about 250 miles to the southeast of Bermuda. It's just hanging around, staying there. I always love seeing systems like this, and it's not even really big enough to be classified as a system, but this cluster of storms, if it can stay out there long enough, and we can see some patterns change and not have too much shear in that area, that might be something to watch over the next few days. It may not, it may just go away, but whenever you see something like that that's maintaining a healthy structure, I always like to keep an eye on those. History has dictated that you sometimes can get surprised by one of those. All right, that's about it. And the last thing is the trivia. I was asked yesterday on one of the lives in the chats, and by the way, chat, if you have a question, ask away. We'll get back to you. But I was asked about the naming of the tropical systems in the Pacific because we just had Hurricane Hone, now Tropical Storm Hone, which will probably not be a tropical storm much for longer. And we had Hector. So we have two storms that both began with the letter H. And for people who track tropical cyclones, hurricanes in the Atlantic, you have one name per letter every year, and it goes alphabetically. And someone asked about that because how could we name two systems with the letter H in the same year? And the answer for that is that one of the systems, in this case, Hone, technically formed into a named storm, in the area that's assigned by the Central North Pacific Zone of Naming Convention. And that is different than the Eastern North Pacific area, which has its own list of storm names. So you could, as in this case, have two storms within, I don't know what that its spread is now. It's probably about 500, 700 miles that actually begin with the same letter. Interesting fact, right? Okay, that's it for this evening. Stay safe if you're in these areas here impacted by these storms this evening, and we will be back with more content. Please like, share, subscribe, especially on YouTube, IG, X, Facebook, and if you have a comment, ask. Be happy to answer. Have a great night, everybody.